Howdy, cadre, and welcome, newcomers. Um, don't be confused. Oh, I've been confusing people for a long time on YouTube. Um, I was once Sad Vipran. My name is Kevin. It's the one my parents gave me, and uh, now I call myself the Druid, or just Druid. At least on the web, the the web druid, to disambiguate from other druids. When Druid came to me, I was hopeful that I was the only one. Um, but there's, I think, somebody in Silicon Valley who calls themselves the Druid, and there's a comic book writer that made a character called the Druid, apparently. I don't know much about that. Those are just the result of searches I've done. Um, don't worry about this. It's just another in a long line of symbolic actions. Um, you don't need to concern yourself with, really. Um, we've hit a convergence, or a inflection point. I've grown more and more sensitive to these things over the many years that I've been thinking about them. Um, it 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 may have started as a child at play. That back in the '80s, we were given pretty free run of the neighborhood. There weren't as many fears back then. Let's not get too distracted by that, but it probably continued because I had a paper route and I was in Boy Scouts, so there was a lot of freedom and solitary exploration that came with those things. Um, then in college, I started what I came to refer to as whim walks, where I would just leave my dorm or co-op later, um, and my full intent was just to follow whims, to at each intersection or in response to any stimulus, um, go where just my current desires or mood would take me. Um, a whim is actually how I met my first girlfriend. Uh, she went to the same small school, a college that my brother had gone to. That's on the East Coast, so in the Midwest, not many people know its name. And back in the old days, humor was sometimes shared through email lists. And if people, I never did this myself, but people would, have a whole list, an address book full of email. Um, and if they got something funny in email, they would send it out to their entire contact list. Uh, I've got a new friend. We're not going to talk about that, but Um, what's to say? I have a hook. Um, Thank you, Hassan Piker, for introducing me to the concept. Um, yeah, first girlfriend. My second girlfriend, I met on a whim walk. I was sitting on um, University of Michigan has these steam tunnels underneath the campus, that are a lot of their utilities run through, so they're maintenance tunnels, um, but they're also heated, um, which is why they're called steam tunnels. And then they have these giant, like maybe 5 feet, 5 foot diameter, maybe 6 foot diameter, concrete tubes that come out of the ground, and they go um, 7 feet high, and then they have metal grill vent caps on top. And I I just had the urge to climb one, the one that's on the northwest corner of the diag, and so I did. And most people were walking by and ignoring me. A few said something, um, asked me what I was doing or whatever, and then walked on. But there was a girl who spotted me from a ways away, and I could just sense that she wanted to speak with me. And so I just waited as she approached and was receptive. I don't even remember who said hello first, but anyways, so I haven't talked about this here because a lot of these are just personal stories that I, for the sake of the other parties involved, I don't want to go into too much detail. And it usually didn't seem that important to me, or it didn't seem related to anything I wanted to share. But boy, this current convergence of events, and I say I'm bad with time, but I feel like this one I was prepared for. I knew was coming. Um, and it's a whole bunch of things. Numerology of the date. I have to write a card to someone today. Um, and I just want to at least write today's date down before it's untrue, and maybe I'll finish composing it tomorrow. But yeah, I thought maybe, I realized right after 222. No, I was thinking about it then, but I ended up busy. And just putting it off because I figured, well, I can use tomorrow's date. And then I was thinking about the numerology and realizing that it'd be nice if it added up to one. Um, let's not get too lost on that. Um, the slap, the slap heard round the world. I tweeted that last night, right after it happened, as I saw the social media frenzy starting. I tweeted in a couple places, the shot heard round the world and the slap heard round the world. And that's a historical reference that you can look up if you're curious. there are a lot of things I say that I hope you will look up. Um, if you're curious about something, and not everything needs to be looked up. I often like to couch humor in my serious comments and hide serious messages in my humorous comments. In fact, there's a threshold that equation helps me cross. That like, I don't think of myself as a comedian really, and so I don't turn to social media just to try and be funny. Um, I've found it, especially on Facebook, just a lot easier to share other people's content that I think is good and either has has a, a, a good message as well as something humorous about it. And it's easy to find those in memes. And I am concerned about um, what you might call censorship, and I need to get to that too. But that should probably be a different video. In fact, I should break these into little videos as I go, so that maybe I'll get several good ones before resorting to, or before the file locks up and my phone fills and stuff. I was smart enough to switch to HD um, instead of, that's like the lowest setting on this phone is HD. And I was using an old camera for a long time, especially with Tuber. I don't think I can use my phone in Tuber. His name be invoked. Its name. Its name. Their name. Their name be invoked. Anyway, yeah, the slap seemed like a intersection of a whole bunch of social forces that have been bubbling. And there's a bunch of other stuff going on. I can't even cover it. I'd be all over the place with this video, but it strikes me that there's a parallel between the slap and the invasion. That, like, there's a march of intent, there's warning signs, there's a lot of history and background behind it, and there's a act of clear violence in response to perceived threats or injustice. But I wanted to focus on the convergence, and I don't know what all I can cover. There's a lot to be talked about in terms of escalation versus de-escalation, appropriate or excessive use of force. We could get into the very much more limiting fight or flight thought, which is usually associated with the reptilian brain, which doesn't mean the brain of reptiles or reptilian peoples. It's the part of our brain that developed in reptiles, and then a lot of other parts of our brain have developed since then as we've evolved to mammals and primates and homos, homos, the Homo genus, which I even just ran into a video of somebody responding to the confusion between the term Homo sapiens and humans and looking at the definition of each and comparing them and trying to make the claim that this was a new form of racism, that Homo sapiens literally means wise men. It comes from, the Greek, that a lot of things come from, especially in science. I've just been talking about that a little bit, I think, in one of the Minecraft videos, but maybe that's not posted yet. I don't remember what's where. Anyways, and then comparing that to humans being, it was confusing because they were being careful with their words. They were intending to post it on Facebook or the meat serve, as I have a meat serve campaign on Facebook. Heyoka duties, which will sound like cultural appropriation to probably to some white people who have any clue what I'm talking about, but that's one thing I wanted to say. I am a child of the earth, and I love life. I love humanity. And I consider myself a student of many religions, old and new, popular and obscure, and as well as a child of science. And I no longer, I don't know if I ever considered myself atheist. There was a time when I was trying to reject Christianity because of a lot of the negativity I saw in mainstream Christianity. But I've gotten past that, and I wouldn't have been confirmed as a Presbyterian at the age of 12 if I had more serious doubts about my ability to have a personal relationship with, at a minimum, the concept of Jesus Christ or the teachings of Jesus Christ. So, yeah, I've never rejected that or denied or defied that. That's a part of me. But when I studied Buddhism, first senior year of high school and then in college, I fell in love with the core concepts. And the core concepts seemed very Christ-like to me in their teachings. And then when I got to college, I took a class. The class I took in high school was Intro to World Religions, but it was at the local Christian college. So I don't know about the religion of my professor, but I know he was a professor at Hope College. Holland, Michigan is a very Reformed Christian focused place. We used to joke that there was a church on every corner. And it would be the Second Reformed, and then maybe a Catholic church, and then a Presbyterian, and then a First Reformed, and then a Baptist, and then a Methodist, and then, the etc. Um, so in that intro to world religions class, I loved because I saw, we kind of focused on the core teachings, the historical, the seed of each of the religions, the major religions, and then, 1 week we tried to cover the rest. And actually, his approach was to save Christianity for last. The last week was Christianity, and he really enjoyed that because inevitably, of course, he's talking about this in class, so maybe it hadn't happened, but yeah, he probably brought it up. I feel like he brought it up earlier, but anyways, inevitably, he would cover the core of Christianity, and someone would raise their hand and say, "Well, that's not everything. That's just a small, like, we haven't spent much time. I know so much more about my religion than you're presenting here. This seems like a very limited perspective." And that was an important teaching moment for him because that was his opportunity to say, "Do you think I covered the other religions in depth? Like, I'm giving kind of equal treatment to all religions, and this is only a starting point. Religions are alive; they're being practiced all over the world, and so it's rather myopic. Um, it's a rather limited perspective to believe that anything I could present here in this time frame would cover it." And so he would make the point that just because I spoke to you and shared some core teachings doesn't mean you understand Islam or Buddhism or Judaism or Shintoism or, um, on and on. So, and he really didn't touch on paganism, I feel, which I think historically would be a good way to intro. Anyways, I'm getting off subject, aren't I? But hopefully it's interesting. Um, I've tried to broaden my faith and understanding through all of that, as well as through science. And I don't want to mislead you because I've been working as a technician most of my adult life, and technicians are generally people who use technical equipment in a scientific field. And for a long time, I started in a darkroom for a photographer. Well, before that, I was a AutoCAD technician doing drafting, computer drafting for architects. Well, no, not architects. I studied to become an architect, but I worked for civil engineers, surveyors, um, yeah. There were other engineers at that firm, but no architects. And that actually allowed me to use my knowledge a little bit because since I was studying architecture, there were some small projects like pump houses that they turned to me to do the uh, drafting of the design for. They would need an architect to sign off of it, but it was a simple, it's simple buildings with standard construction, block and brick usually at that time construction. Anyways, I this is not going the direction I thought it was going, and it's twice as long as I was hoping. So I'm not here to push my faith on you. It's too complex and multifaceted to expect to be even able to explain it, but the intention, of course, is that this is a safe space, and the focus is on constant learning, greater understanding, um, putting a more perfect vision of the world, constantly developing. I mean, in a way, this sounds a lot like science, living science, changing science, as opposed to accepted science. And there's a reason for that. My faith and my cosmology is largely based on trying to um, bridge the gap between the two hemispheres of my brain. The corpus callosum, if you will, um, is the tangle between the two hemispheres that allows communication between sides. And I'll tell you this quick before I let you go, that something that horrified me when I learned about it, to the level of like existential crisis, was stories about people who have brain damage involving the corpus callosum, that, and some of the stories are developmental, um, but most of them are from head injuries, severe head trauma, that has damaged those connections. And what horrified me was stories of people who, um, to get this straight, as an example, um, right-handed people are, that they I think it's in at the base of your skull, that or maybe it's in your head. Anyways, your nerves cross over each other. So right-handed people tend to be left brain dominant, and left-handed people tend to be right brain dominant. And you can go back, my first video that I uploaded for public consumption, I dyed my hands red and blue, and it was in part because of this crossover effect and the desire to resolve the two hemispheres of my brain, or to reunite the two hemispheres of my brain. But that as an allegory for our political system, that we've become so polarized, um, ambivalent, I might say it that way, instead of ambivalent, because we now use ambivalent to mean, I don't really care. I could go either way. But originally, valence is, I think it's directionality, valence. So ambivalent means directional in two ways. And the original meaning of ambivalent was ambivalence, which was that I have conflicting feelings or thoughts about a specific subject, and that cognitive dissonance has guided this channel from the beginning, from Sadvipran to WebDruid. And I feel like I'm much more balanced and centered now than I was when I started. But we're still on the path, and we're getting to a half-hour mark. Corpus callosum. Oh, Radical centrism. Insert catchphrase here.